Welcome to the Healing Practice Podcast, a space for navigating the natural seasons of womanhood and personal growth. Hosted by Claire Cleaver, author, counsellor, and practitioner, this podcast explores the key stages of womanhood, from the first bloom of puberty, through fertility and birth, to the powerful transition of perimenopause and menopause. Drawing on years of experience supporting women and families, Claire shares practical insights and reflective tools designed to restore balance, release what's been held, and support emotional and physical well-being. This podcast is about listening, understanding, and walking your path with greater clarity and compassion. Wherever you are on your journey, you're welcome here.
Welcome to the Healing Practice Podcast. Thank you for attending and for listening. We hope that you find it useful and interesting and that it will benefit your life. So the first theme that we're going to talk about is the shifting bloom. And that might seem like an odd title, but the shifting bloom relates to recognizing that we shift with the seasons just as nature does. It relates to how we move from summer, which some of you might still be experiencing, into autumn. And that is what the shifting bloom means. So there is a certain amount of emotional recalibration. And recalibration simply means a sort of a settling, an alignment. Things have shifted, and when we recalibrate them, we shift them into a slightly different order. And so that we feel in our body emotionally in terms of feelings, of course, and our thoughts, and that then affects our physical body, and not just our physical body, but our psyche or our spiritual essence, if you want to call it that as well. And so this season is an important one to adjust to. It's a transition. So most of you may have enjoyed a wonderful summer full of hot days, long, languorous days, maybe swimming, having less clothes on and feeling loose in your body, a looseness, and enjoying that lovely sort of freedom, if you like. Hanging out with friends, especially if you have children and you get to enjoy the extended holidays of that, of just being with your children day in, day out, no schedules, no routines. Christmas is done, and now you're simply just learning, not learning, but, kind of relearning, but enjoying being with each other. And that has its own rewards, deepening the bonds of family. And now, of course, February is when things change. So children return to school, or they start new schools, and all of the anticipation of what that is like. Then there is the rush again, back to the scheduling, the programs of getting the kids ready, dressed, and out, whether they're driving, whether you're driving them, and it becomes a little bit more of a hustle and bustle. And that also signals a shifting bloom, if you like, into the next season. And then mostly the woman is left at home, not picking up the pieces, but re-entering into her new year once the children have gone. And for those women that don't have children, it might simply be picking up pace in their job, in their career, starting to format goals or plans for what they would like this year to be. And for young girls, adolescents, that too is a pivotal start to what is their school year going to be like, thinking about forming new friendships based on what their friendships from last year were like. And there is that shifting ground that goes on as she most certainly is going through an emotional recalibration, finding a sense of belonging. And a sense of belonging is incredibly pervasive, not just in young girls, but when you're a mother or when you're an older woman and you have young adolescent in their very first bloom of womanhood navigating this particular phase, your heart goes out to them because you remember what it was like when you were going through that. And it's not easy. So there is a sense of not sadness, but wanting it to be better for them. So there is a lot going on in this shifting bloom. And then, of course, you've got women who are wanting to be fertile. And fertility can take many forms. We think of it as fertile in terms of becoming pregnant and having a baby. But there is another aspect of fertility, and that's creativeness. Being creative in your pursuits and having those run alongside your life in whatever your particular pathway is. And then the other aspect of, or bloom, if you like, shifting season, which is women who are older, who are perimenopausal, women whose children are perhaps older, their careers are more established, and they have aging parents, often called the sandwich generation. Not very comfortable. Not very comfortable at all. I say that again because I'm sure if that's where you are, you will completely relate. It's a toughie. So it's like you're squeezed out of what your needs are because your needs become, I don't know where your needs get placed, but they're not at the top of the list. So if you've got children, adolescent children, more than likely going through puberty, all the changes that requires, navigating friendships, schools, all of that, relationships at home, shifting dynamics. And then if you've got aging parents, then their conversation becomes very much focused on their ailments, their medications, their worries about people coming into the home for personal care, all of those little things that are starting to tell them that their lives are changing and not in the way that they would like. So it becomes very difficult. And you, the woman, is the mediator of all of this, running from one to the other. So the shifting season from summer to autumn can almost signify, gosh, I did all of that. I ran around. I loved being in the sun, socializing, can signify, a quieter time. And so it's like, if it's going to be a quieter time, just like nature asks us to do, it's a quieter time of turning inward, more reflection, how to give yourself, allow yourself to have more rest. What does that look like? Not just at the end of the day when you fall into bed, absolutely done. That's not rest as such, that's necessary sleep. But rest in different ways, like taking time off for yourself. Reading a book, what a joy. Putting your feet up in the middle of the day before the kids come home, or some other time when you give yourself the fullest permission possible to say, I'm doing this. So that rest. So autumn is a turning inward, not a fallow time at all, but gathering your resources and giving yourself time off. That's pretty much what it is. And recognizing that we shift with the seasons just as nature does. So another really important season, if you like, is very much in the shifting bloom. And this is the women who are in their 40s and onwards. So that's a pretty big group. So, but more specifically, women who are going through perimenopause and then into menopause and then beyond. So as you can see, that's a pretty big group. But nonetheless, it is very much a shifting bloom. So a woman in her 40s has kind of got it all. She's, at the pinnacle of her career, if she's working. And if she has children, she's fully into the management of that and very much the queen of the domestic scene. So there's a lot going on. And perimenopause creates a very big shift in a woman's life. Up until then, her body has been comfortably making the equal amounts or the right amounts of estrogen and progesterone particularly. So perimenopause then starts to produce less estrogen. And as the estrogen reduces, a very interesting emotional recalibration starts to take place. And you may have heard already that estrogen is also dubbed the accommodating hormone. And there's good and bad news about that. The good news is that women think, thank God I don't have to be Miss Nice anymore. Thank goodness, I can comfortably own my feelings. I can be angry and snappy behind closed doors, but you get better at it. You get better at not having to apologize for your, oh, sorry, I was a bit mean. So there comes a point where you start to accept your changing emotional state and not being apologetic and having to justify it. Oh, it's because I'm going through perimenopause. In a way, it's coming back to a sense of belonging, that you don't belong to your children, as hard as that might seem to say. You don't belong to your parents. You don't belong to your husband or your job, your spouse or your partner, but you belong to you. And so perimenopause starts to seed that, I belong to myself, not needing to strive to be a part of a group, belong to a group. I just left my book club recently, and I have a sense of mourning about that. But there's something liberating about moving on and not having to find a group to belong to feel good about yourself. And that starts to be felt, noticed in perimenopause, and it can be unsettling because you formed these groups and it's like, oh, what does that mean? I don't like my friends anymore. It's not quite like that, but you start to be more picky. Picky is a very good word, and the word that you want to teach your kids, especially your daughters, to be picky in who they choose to be in their lives, even though, yes, that carries a different sort of weight, but that's another story to tell. So perimenopause and menopause are about women starting to feel differently about themselves and starting to think of life beyond their children, beyond the home that they currently have. And that starts to open up a different vista of thinking, maybe I could go back to, maybe I could do this. And a woman will often think about creative pursuits that she's put aside and would like to go back to. Painting or writing or whatever, or joining a group that's more involved in fitness, or even go back to more education. She wants to do another degree or something like that. So a woman starts to open herself to those things, and she is no longer content to be mom, the partner, the daughter. She doesn't want to do that anymore. She knows she has to, but she can see this wonderful opening that comes up in perimenopause and menopause. So don't give up heart and be overcome by all the hot flushes and the moodiness. That's just the stepping stone, the emotional recalibration that is all part of that transition to moving on. And it's pretty liberating. And so if we go from seeing where we've started with autumn, let's move into winter. So winter is a season where you can truly rug up, where you feel the invigoration of the cold air. And there is a kind of closing in, but it feels really comforting to be out, to enjoy the briskness of the air, to feel your body respond to the movement in colder air. And that's a good thing. It's exhilarating to sort of test yourself, to feel the cold air on your face, the wind, and to be thoroughly elemental. And then to look forward to going home to a warm house. And so winter is all about those things, like warm food, being a little bit more inclusive with your family, or wanting to invite people over. So there's a different kind of mood that goes on in winter, where people start to think about quieter things, inside things, reading, just smaller pursuits on the domestic scene. And that can feel like a coming home, if you like. So So often the feelings are, and there's an emotional recalibration in that too. So it's like a sense of comfort. And you might describe winter for you a little bit differently depending on the kind of winter that you experience in your particular country, from extremely cold to sort of subtropical, where it never really gets cold, but the air quality still changes. And so that's a broad flavour of winter. And then at the end of winter, what is the most exciting part about leaving winter is the first little signs of spring. And that tends to lift your heart. It's like, oh, we're about to lose all this coldness. And then the cold starts to, instead of being comfortable, becomes miserable. It becomes a weight. And that's a sign of the shifting mood, if you like, of we're sick of winter, we're done, we want to look forward to this next season. Spring is uplifting. And the first signs are the air quality. It starts to get a little bit warmer, but there is unpredictability in spring. It can be hot one day and then almost have a changing season, like 4 seasons in one day. Or it can be winter, or it can be really cold. So, and that's the unpredictability of spring. And so with spring comes a more enlivened spirit. We get excited about longer days of daylight, warmer weather. And so there is that lovely shift into spring, into hopefulness, if you like, new life. And we certainly see that in animals, young animals being born. And that's very much a marker of spring. The weather is warm enough to sustain new life. And not just new life, but new ideas, new hope. That's a flavour of spring. And then we move into summer, and then we've come full circle into the beautiful, liberating, warm weather of sun where we can just express ourselves differently in warmer days, immerse ourselves in water. And in that languor sometimes of sunny weather, there is a deep relaxation that can settle into the body. And the sun does that for us. Almost soporific, and that's okay. But that deep comfort of not having to do anything because you're probably too hot and bothered, but just being able to settle into the body without restrictions. And summer gives us that sense too. So a really interesting question that people often ask is, how important is it for us to be aware of the seasons around us and the seasonal changes? Because for the most part, we're pretty disconnected from all of that because we live in air-conditioned houses. We don't even have to think about if it's cold outside. We step out into our cars that take us to where we're going. We step into another air-conditioned building. And so our traversing back and forth in nature, if you like, is very minimal. It's almost like intermittent steps. And so it is important. So the idea is to remind ourselves that we are creatures. We may not like that word. We are creatures of nature as well. And we need to make connection, not avoid it, and not feel inconvenienced by it, but we need to make active steps to actually invite ourselves back into nature. So that would be my answer to that. And there are lots of many ways in how to do that. Be out there, find what you like to do, and enjoy that experience of what it is for you to be in nature. So how does all of this understanding about the seasonal shift, shifting blooms, all of that, how does that tie back to you in terms of a healing space or wellness within you? Because that's a word that we now use very often. But at the same time, we could really use the word healing, because that is a deeper space that I would want you to invite into yourselves. And so, again, coming back to the construct that we have about ourselves as a human on a particular pathway and full of purpose. But again, it's that invitation to come back to nature, to step outside, to feel the changing air from winter through to summer again, to be a part of this beautiful world that we are gifted with having, and that we are also gifted with having to give back to it. The world gives endlessly to us, and so part of our job in being here is to give back to the world, to enjoy it. And so to really be in that part of the world instead of comfortably contained in your beautiful air-conditioned box. So to step out, enjoy the world. And there's lots of data that say, again, that walking in the forest, walking in a garden, tending a garden, all of those simple things of walking your feet on a garden path, putting your hands in soil, looking up to the sun, as we do in summer, or perhaps with sunglasses and a hat nowadays. So that is the call to you to easily increase your healing within by just doing that, taking a walk.
You've been listening to the Healing Practice podcast with Claire Cleaver. If today's episode resonated, you're invited to continue the journey with Claire beyond the podcast. You'll find books, guided resources, workshops, and opportunities to work with Claire one-to-one at thehealingpractice.com.au. Whether you're seeking support, understanding, or a deeper connection to the season of life you're in, there's space there to explore at your own pace. Until next time, trust your body's wisdom, honour where you are, and move gently through the season you're living.